Hey, what's up, guys? It's Bakes here, and first of all, happy Halloween, and thank you for joining me for this Halloween edition of my random horror reviews. Funny enough, today's movie actually does not take place on Halloween or anything like that, but it does have those Halloween vibes, and it's one of those movies you want to watch around this time of year, just all the fun and monsters that come with it. So, today's movie is The Monster Squad from 1987. So before we get into my thoughts of this movie, let's quickly get into the plot for the Monster Squad. So Dracula has returned after 100 years to find this amulet that will help him rule and whatever. But to help him, find this amulet, he uses the help of some other classic monsters. You have the Wolfman, you have the Creature or the Gillman, whatever you want to call him, the Mummy, and of course Frankenstein's monster, rounding out the five villains in this movie. However, the only thing standing in their way is the Monster Squad, a group of kids who are obsessed with monsters and horror movies. And yeah, that's pretty much the plot for this movie. For those who haven't seen this movie before, it's not straight up horror, obviously, as you could probably tell. It's more so a comedy adventure slash horror movie. Think The Goonies with classical Universal monsters in it. So that's our plot for this movie. So let's move on to my thoughts of The Monster Squad from 1987. Now, when I hear people talk about this movie, I often hear people talk about how they grew up watching The Monster Squad or how it's a nostalgic film for them. But I actually can't relate in either way. I probably saw this movie for the first time late in my teens, maybe even possibly early into being an adult. If I had to pick, I'd probably say late teens, but somewhere around there. And sometimes with movies like that, or like this one, nostalgia can play a big factor into the movie's enjoyment. But it's not the case with this one for me personally. Ever since I saw this movie for the first time, whenever it was, it instantly became a easy slash fun watch, because it really is like a movie like The Goonies. Those kids being in a group going on an adventure. Particular parts of this movie also kind of remind me of The Lost Boys in ways. That could just be me, but movies like that. As I said, the group of kids going on this adventure against something bigger than themselves. Just movies of like an era like that, that are just so good and so fun. And I know everyone says this, but they just don't make movies like this anymore. The only ones that I can really think of, over modern times is like the It remake from 2017, Chapter 1 when they're kids, or the new Ghostbuster sequels kind of have that feel, but it's not quite the same. And I get a lot of it is just a product of being from the 80s or a product of its time. You got the cheesy rock and roll music montages that are fun. Even the closing scene, it's got music that's like an original song. It's like singing about being in the Monster Squad and shit, which I think is cool. It's got kids swearing, which, it sounds like a weird thing to highlight, but I love that because it's like, it feels like real kids. It feels like kids being real people instead of, what Hollywood wants to make them nowadays. Like, you've literally got a character in this movie where his nickname is the Fat Kid. Like, they walk around going, hey, where's Fat Kid? And if it was like a movie that came out nowadays, like, it would either be a throwback film taking place in the 80s or 90s, so they're like, oh, that's just how it was back then. Or if it was a movie taking place nowadays, it would be shown as like straight up bullying. Which in this movie, he doesn't like being called Fat Kid, but he just gets along with it because, I don't know. It just, as I said, it's a product of its time, and like I was saying, a lot of this stuff is just a product of its times. In the first 10 minutes of this movie, they use the term, I'm actually not sure what I can say on YouTube, a bundle of sticks, the F word. They use that term like twice in the first 10 minutes. They also say, I think I can say homo. They say homo in like the first 10 minutes as well. And like I said, like, I'm not condoning swearing and using that kind of language, and a lot of that is, dated. But just like, it's that time in history where PG movies or whatever just dropped casual swearing like, nothing, and it was just fine. It's that era, and all these movies have that particular feel, which is just a lot of fun, and it's like time in a bottle, really. So moving on, I really like the lineup of monsters that we get in this movie and their designs and performances for the most part. Like all the makeup and effects are really solid. Like the only one I don't love, which is a bit weird because most people would say that it's like their fan favorite monster from this movie, but is the Wolfman. To me, he kind of looks more like a cat than a wolf. But the transformation scene is like really great. And I'm not saying I hate the Wolfman or I hate his design, but as I said, he kind of looks more like a cat. But that transformation scene is actually like really good. I'm surprised more people don't talk about that scene in this movie because the effects are just really well done there. Moving on, I love how decrepit the mummy is in this movie. And that scene where he's in the closet is actually kind of freaky. I don't know why, it kind of scares me. It's like something out of fucking Goosebumps, but something with him in the closet reaching out and the light coming down on his head I find actually kind of scary. The creature, or the Gillman, or whatever you want to call him, a bit more detail is given to his design in this movie compared to, the old Universal ones, which is nice. Frankenstein is charming, and if you've seen this movie before, you'd know that he is a highlight of this film. Now, out of all the monsters, this is probably the one I've heard most people say they're not a fan of, and that being Dracula. And maybe it's just his performance. I don't really know, but I also don't really mind. I think it's pretty good. I think the thing that probably makes Dracula's performance stand out more compared to the rest of the monsters is that all of the other adaptations of the monsters that have come beforehand have been very makeup heavy. Like if we look at Frankenstein, for example, yes, we've had actors really make Frankenstein their own. Boris Karloff, for example. But once all the prosthetics and makeup is put on, a lot of the face is taken away. Dracula, the most iconic version of Dracula, has been Bela Lugosi, where it was just Lugosi's face. But in this movie, it's not Lugosi, it's clearly someone else. So I think maybe that's a reason why a lot of people sort of hate on Dracula compared to the rest of the other monsters. But overall, again, the lineup is a lot of fun, really good. I like the 5 monsters that we have here. I really like how the opening to this movie, taking place 100 years in the past, kind of feels like the climax of another movie's ending. Just really puts into scale like the level of threat that these kids will be dealing with in just an everyday location, being the suburbs and in this small town and whatever. But on the flip side, I also really enjoy the final showdown and ending to the actual movie itself. It just has so much fun and action and a lot of laughs too, actually. Like the whole reveal where she's not actually a virgin, I think is pretty funny. And honestly pretty sad when Frankenstein has to leave and Phoebe's crying. And if you've seen this movie, don't lie, it still fucking hits in the feels. I don't care if you're fucking, a kid or an adult, that part's sad. But that there stands, a point for how iconic this movie is, because long before I had seen this movie, I knew there was a sad part with Frankenstein. I also knew the iconic lines of, oh, Wolfman's got nards, and when he clicks the gun, my name is Horus. Just so many iconic lines, and knowing those lines and what movie they came from, without actually have seen the movie myself for the longest time, just goes to show what an iconic and timeless movie this one is. So for a score out of 10, I'm going to give The Monster Squad an 8.5. It's just so much fun. As I said, it's an easy watch. You can chuck it on whatever time. I'm not going to lie, I actually watched this movie 2 times in a row going into this review. I watched it last night. I put it on pretty late, so I watched about 85% of the movie. And instead of this morning just watching the last however long was left, I just watched it again from the start because it's just that easy of a movie to sit through and enjoy. I'm surprised they never done a sequel to The Monster Squad. I think that could have been fun. Like, bring back the main 5, sure, add in, what other classical monsters you could do. The Bride of Frankenstein, you could do the Invisible Man, characters like that. I was actually thinking, like, if they did a Monster Squad, in recent times, like, what monsters would they have? You would have to have, like, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Pennywise, something like that. But obviously that would just be a fucking pain to set up, with studios and whatever. But I think that would be a lot of fun. But either way, again, thank you for joining me for this Halloween edition of my random horror reviews. Hopefully you guys are all having a fun, safe Halloween. Not much is going on here. As I've said in the past, Halloween is just not a big holiday here in Australia, but doesn't mean I can't get in the Halloween vibes and watch some Halloween movies and stuff like that. So I'm going to be busy watching shit, guys, and hopefully you guys are all digging into your horror collections as well, and just getting in the vibe of the season. So thank you for joining me again, guys, and I'll see you for another video soon. Peace.